Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Spark and Shine. There are moments in life when silence speaks louder than applause, and disregard echoes deeper than praise. In these moments, we are not being punished, we are being positioned. Life, in all its intricate wisdom, often hides its greatest teachings in the quiet dismissal of others. Like the moon, we are sometimes most luminous when unseen, most powerful in the dark. Every slight, every cold shoulder, every unreturned kindness is not a reflection of our worth, but a note in the greater symphony, one that calls us not to react, but to remember who we are, and more importantly, whose we are. There is a divine rhythm beneath all things, a choreography that we do not always understand, but are always a part of. You are not lost in the chaos. You are a vital step in the cosmic dance, or a vital step in the cosmic dance. And even when the world looks away, the universe never stops watching you become. You know, when someone disrespects us, it's easy, almost instinctive, to take it personally. We feel the sting. We replay what they said, how they said it, how it made us feel small, invisible, unworthy, unworthy. And we start to wonder, what's wrong with me? That question is a heavy one. It can settle deep inside us, and if we're not careful, it starts to become part of the story we tell ourselves. But here's something worth sitting with. Disrespect says far more about the person giving it than the one receiving it. When someone fails to honor you, they're often speaking from their own pain, fear, or disconnection. It's not about you. It never really was. They may be wrestling with insecurity, or they've grown used to chaos as a form of communication. Maybe they were never taught how to treat people well, how to speak with kindness, how to lead with empathy. Maybe they're projecting. Because people tend to leak whatever they've never healed. So when that moment comes, the one where someone talks over you, cuts you down, or chooses to look through you as if your presence has no weight, I want you to do something radical. I want you to pause, not to retreat, not to retaliate, just pause and observe not just them, but yourself. Because what they're showing you isn't truth, it's a mirror. And that mirror isn't meant to show you who you are, it's showing you who they are. Most people live from the outside in. They let the way others treat them define their self-worth. But the invitation, especially in moments of disrespect, is to live from the inside out, to realize that your value is not up for negotiation, not even in the presence of ignorance. The question isn't, oh, why are they treating me this way? The question is, what is this moment asking of me? Because here's the truth. You are not here to fix people. You are not here to convince someone to see your light. You are not responsible for teaching someone how to honor what they've chosen to ignore. Your responsibility is to stay rooted in who you are, especially when someone else forgets. That doesn't mean you become passive. It means you become anchored. You shift from taking offense to taking inventory. What part of me feels threatened? Why is this affecting me so deeply? What story is being triggered in me? You see, disrespect, when met with reflection, becomes a tool for self-awareness. It becomes the fire that forges a deeper understanding of who you are and who you're still becoming. And maybe that's the deeper point here. Disrespect can either diminish you or define your depth. I've learned that the people who hurt others are often the ones most disconnected from themselves. And in some strange, sacred way, your dignity in those moments can serve as a mirror back to them. A quiet reminder that there is another way to be human. Not every act of disrespect deserves your energy. Some just need your understanding and your distance. Because not everyone deserves a front row seat to your becoming. But let's be honest, that's hard. It's hard. It's hard not to react. It's hard not to want to explain yourself or prove your worth. But consider this: stars don't explain their light, oceans don't explain their depth, trees don't justify their shade. They simply are. And their presence speaks loudest in stillness. So the next time someone doesn't respect you, I want you to do something that goes against every emotional instinct. I want you to see them, not through the lens of your pain, but through the lens of theirs. Are they yours? And then I want you to see yourself clearly, completely, changed by their inability to honor what is sacred in you. Because that's the thing about mirrors. They can reflect back distortion, but they can also reflect back strength. They can remind you that your worth was never dependent on someone else's perception. It was always there, untouched, unshaken, waiting for you to remember it. So don't shrink. Don't silence yourself to be digestible. Don't bend to fit into a space that was never built to hold your truth. Truth. Instead, stand tall, speak when needed, walk away when necessary, and above all, see clearly, because their reflection is not your identity. There's something profoundly powerful about choosing not to respond right away, not because you're weak, not because you're avoiding conflict, but because you've learned that real power doesn't shout. It doesn't slam doors or fire back clever insults. Real power listens, then chooses stillness over noise. When someone disrespects you, everything in your body wants to react. It's human. We feel threatened, and so the instinct is to defend, explain, correct, or confront. We want to take back control. But here's the thing. When we react, we're not actually taking back control. We're giving it away. We're allowing someone else's brokenness to dictate our response. We step into their storm and then wonder why we feel lost in it. Stillness is not about doing nothing. It's not about silence for the sake of silence. Stillness is a posture of presence. It's the ability to see clearly, even when your emotions are loud. It's the wisdom to say, I don't need to prove myself here. I don't need to win this. Stillness is restraint with purpose. The world often rewards noise. It celebrates the quick comeback, the person who claps back, the one who gets the last word. But what it forgets is that growth isn't always loud. Healing isn't loud. Wisdom? It almost always whispers. There's a quiet kind of strength in the person who doesn't let their peace get hijacked by someone else's chaos. Think about it. Has reacting in anger ever truly made you feel better long term? Maybe in the moment it gives you a sense of power. But afterward, we're often left with regret. We replay what we said, wonder what they thought, and slowly feel that sinking sense that we handed over our composure for a moment of short-lived satisfaction. But when you choose stillness, when you don't respond the way they expect, you disarm the entire cycle. You break the pattern. The pattern. You make it clear, I am not here to match your energy. I am here to preserve mine. Because the truth is, not everything deserves your voice. Not every situation requires your engagement. Some things, and some people, only grow louder because you give them your presence. And presence is a sacred gift. It should be given wisely. Stillness doesn't mean you suppress your feelings. It means you hold them with care. You honor them. You let the initial emotion rise, and then you choose what to do with it. And that space between the feeling and the response, that's where your power lives. That's where self-respect lives. It's in the pause, the intentional breath, the quiet decision to stay grounded. And here's the beauty. When you make space for stillness, you begin to hear something more honest. Your own voice. Not the voice that wants revenge. Not the voice of ego. But the voice of clarity. The voice that says, I'm not going to lower myself to meet them. I'm going to rise in my own way. And sometimes that rise looks like saying nothing. Sometimes it looks like walking away. Sometimes it's just a quiet smile, knowing they haven't touched even a fraction of your worth. Stillness teaches you how to hold your power instead of spending it. And people notice, even if they don't say it out loud. They feel your presence. They sense your depth. Because we live in a world addicted to reaction, and when someone moves through it with peace, that peace becomes magnetic. It's rare. It's unexpected. And it leaves an impression that lasts far longer than any clever reply ever could. You're not here to win arguments. You're not here to prove anything to people who've already decided not to see you clearly. You're here to become, to evolve. To master the art of choosing where and how you spend your energy. And sometimes the most profound thing you can do is not respond at all. Now, this isn't about being passive. This is about being deliberate. It's about knowing that your value doesn't rise or fall depending on someone else's tone. It's about being the person who brings calm to the room instead of being pulled into the storm. Because at the end of the day, how you respond when you're disrespected says more about your character than their behavior ever could. So when you feel the urge to react, to fire back, to defend, to match their energy, pause. Take a breath. Choose your stillness. Because in a world full of noise, your silence can be the loudest statement of all. There's a quiet courage in choosing boundaries. It doesn't always look like bravery. Sometimes it looks like saying less. Sometimes it looks like not showing up where you're expected to. Sometimes it's just the simple act of choosing yourself in a moment where you've always chosen others. Chosen others. When we talk about handling people who don't respect you, one of the most misunderstood tools, maybe the most undervalued one, is the boundary. We think boundaries are walls, cold, rigid barriers we put up to shut people out. But they're not. Boundaries are doorways to self respect. They're not about pushing people away, they're about inviting the right people in. The truth is, people will treat you how you allow them to. And if someone consistently disrespects you, what they're really telling you is, I don't understand how to love you in the way you deserve. And when you don't set a boundary, the message you quietly send back is, "Oh, that's okay." But it's not okay. Because when we allow someone to cross a line that goes against our dignity, our values, our peace, we're not just betraying some abstract principle, we're betraying ourselves. And we do that more than we realize, out of fear, out of guilt, out of the deep desire to be liked, to be needed, to belong. But here's the deeper truth: you were not created to be tolerated, you were meant to be honored. And when someone makes a habit of disrespecting you, whether through dismissiveness, criticism, control, or manipulation, it's not your job to fix them. It's your responsibility to protect yourself. Sometimes that means having the hard conversation. Sometimes it means saying, "This is not okay with me." Other times, it's quieter. You stop answering texts that drain you. You take longer to respond to the people who only show up when they want something. You stop rearranging your piece to accommodate someone else's chaos. It's not revenge. It's not pettiness. It's clarity. Boundaries are the evidence that you've stopped negotiating with people over your worth. They are the practice of self-respect in action. But setting a boundary is only half the story. The other half, maybe the harder half, is holding it. Because the moment you draw a line, someone will test it, especially those who benefited from your lack of one. People may call you difficult, selfish, cold. They'll say you've changed. And the truth is, they're right. You have changed. You've stopped handing out access to your energy like it's free. You've started asking, does this relationship nourish me or drain me? Does this person see me or do they just use me? You start choosing peace over people pleasing. And it's uncomfortable. Especially if you've built an identity around being the nice one, the easygoing one, the one who always makes room for everyone else. But the thing is, the most loving, generous people are often the most exhausted. Not because they give too much, but because they give too much, but because they give where they're not received. So what happens when you create boundaries with compassion? You begin to realign with who you are. You begin to reclaim your time, your mental clarity, your emotional space. You start to realize that protecting your peace doesn't mean you're abandoning others. It means you're finally showing up for yourself. And ironically, the more you honor yourself, the more capable you become of giving healthy love to others. Not love rooted in guilt or obligation or the fear of being left, but love that is clean, boundaried, respectful. True, it's also worth saying, boundaries don't always require explanation. You don't owe everyone a paragraph. You don't have to defend your growth. Sometimes a shift in behavior is enough, and if they don't get it, that's okay. Growth often means outgrowing the versions of ourselves that once made other people comfortable. But here's where it gets really important. Boundaries are not meant to punish others. They're not acts of war, they're acts of wisdom. They come from a place of understanding, not anger, from love, not just for others, but for yourself. Because sometimes the kindest thing you can say to someone who disrespects you is simply a no, not here, not like this. You're not responsible for how they receive it. You're responsible for how you deliver it, with clarity, with calm, and with conviction. And you know what? That kind of boundary doesn't just change relationships, it transforms you. It creates space for your values to breathe, for your dignity to grow roots, for your heart to remember what it feels like to be protected. Not just by others, but by you. Because at the end of the day, boundaries aren't about who you keep out. They're about what you're finally allowing in: peace, purpose, And the quiet knowing that you are worth the respect you once begged for. You are not being mean. You're finally being meaningful. Oh, there's something deeply exhausting about living in a world where your value is constantly being measured by how others see you. One minute, you're praised. The next, you're ignored. One day, you're celebrated, and the next, you're invisible. And if you're not careful, you start riding that wave like it's the only truth that exists. You start mistaking your reflection in someone else's opinion for your identity. But let me tell you something that changed everything for me. Your worth is not a vote. It's not a poll. It doesn't rise when someone likes you or fall when someone dismisses you. Your worth is not a mirror. It's a flame. It doesn't need validation to burn. But when people disrespect you, especially those you love or look up to, it cuts deep. It makes you question things. Am I too much? Not enough. Did I say the wrong thing? Am I wrong to take up space? So that spiral happens quietly, subtly, and before long, we start adjusting who we are to avoid feeling that sting again. We shrink. We soften our voice. We compromise. Not out of weakness, but out of survival. Survival. But here's the hard truth. If your sense of self is built on the opinions of people who don't know how to value you, then it will break every time they change their mind. There's something liberating, actually, something sacred, about rooting your identity in something deeper, something untouchable. Something untouchable. Not in the ever-shifting opinions of others, but in your values, your purpose, your truth. Something divine, something unshakable. Because when you root yourself there, disrespect doesn't destabilize you anymore. It may sting, but it doesn't define. Imagine living your life not trying to be seen, but simply choosing to see yourself, to live in a way that says, even if you don't recognize who I am, I do. And I'm not waiting for your permission to be whole. That shift is everything. The mistake we make is thinking that respect from others will somehow complete us. We believe that if we just get them to acknowledge our value, we'll finally feel like we belong. But belonging doesn't start out there. It starts in here. Belonging isn't when other people say, "You're good enough." Belonging is when you say it and mean it. When you start seeing your life as something with divine weight, as something with a purpose beyond momentary approval. You begin to realize how small the criticism really is. You realize that some people simply don't have the capacity to honor you, not because you're lacking, but because their vision is limited, and you stop making it your job to expand their view. You start showing up differently. You stop chasing recognition, and you start living from alignment. You walk into rooms with less need and more clarity. You don't need to dominate a space to feel worthy. You just need to be in integrity with yourself. Think about it. The tree doesn't care if you admire it. It still grows. The ocean doesn't ask for applause. It still moves. The mountain doesn't bow when you walk by. It just stands. There is a kind of dignity in nature that doesn't beg to be seen. It simply is. And maybe we're meant to learn from that. You don't have to prove yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding. You don't have to keep performing for a stage that was never meant to hold the weight of your truth. You're allowed to stop, to breathe, to remember that your identity is not a reaction. It's a revelation. It is something you carry within you, not something others give to you, to you. And that's when things begin to shift. You stop personalizing disrespect. You stop internalizing rejection, and you begin to realize that sometimes the only validation you need is the quiet knowing that you are living in alignment with your soul. That's not ego. That's clarity. You were not born to chase affirmation. You were born to live your purpose, fully, freely, whether or not anyone claps. So when someone doesn't respect you, when they overlook you or minimize your value, you can let it pass through. Not because you don't care, but because you know who you are. You are. And no one can take from you what they didn't give you in the first place. You are not here to be seen by everyone. You're here to be true to yourself. Sometimes the people who disrespect you are the very ones who end up teaching you something you couldn't have learned any other way. Not because they were wise or kind, but because their behavior pulled something out of you, something you didn't know was there, and you didn't know was there. A new level of awareness. A stronger spine. A deeper sense of what you deserve. The pain they caused didn't feel like a lesson at the time, of course. It felt like betrayal. Like confusion, like standing in a room where your voice didn't echo back, where your kindness was met with indifference, or worse, with contempt. And it's easy in those moments to let bitterness grow roots, to replay the conversations, to craft the perfect comeback in your head, to wonder why it happened the way it did. It's natural. We're wired to make sense of pain. But the thing about bitterness is that it starts as a defense mechanism, and then quietly becomes a lens, one you don't even realize you're wearing. It colors everything. You start to see every new relationship, every opportunity, every interaction through the shadow of that past hurt. You become guarded, and not the good kind of guarded, the kind that keeps joy out too. But what if disrespect wasn't meant to break you? What if it was meant to build you? What if instead of letting it harden you, you let it hone you? You let it hone you? What if the disrespect wasn't the end of your worth, but the beginning of your awakening? Because that's what happens when you stop reacting and start reflecting. The question becomes less about why they treated you that way and more about what that experience is trying to wake up in you. Is it asking you to speak up when you usually stay quiet? Is it showing you where your boundaries need reinforcement? Is it helping you finally see yourself more clearly, now that someone else has refused to? Sometimes the gift comes wrapped in silence, in rejection, in being overlooked. It's not the wrapping we wanted, but inside it, there's a message. One that says, you're ready to see yourself more truthfully than you ever have before. And no, this isn't about spiritual bypassing. It's not about pretending the pain doesn't matter or putting a fake silver lining on every cruel word. The pain does matter. The disappointment is real. But transformation doesn't happen when we avoid pain. It happens when we alchemize it. When we let it burn away, what no longer belongs in us. I've seen people rise from the ashes of disrespect with more clarity, more compassion, more courage than ever before. Not because the pain disappeared, but because they chose not to carry it the same way. They stopped asking for closure from the person who disrespected them. They started giving themselves truth instead. And truth has this way of unburdening you. It frees you to say, I deserved better, and I still do. It frees you to walk away without needing to be understood. To forgive, not because they asked, but because you no longer want to hold that energy inside your chest. Disrespect, when faced with open eyes, becomes the starting point for something greater, a deeper connection to yourself, a clearer direction forward. A fierce kind of softness that says, I can still be kind, and I will never abandon myself again. Because the real power doesn't lie in how quickly you move on. It lies in how intentionally you choose to move forward. Not bitter, not jaded, but a wiser, stronger, more discerning, more discerning. You stop proving, performing, pretending. You stop waiting for someone else to give you the permission you always had. You begin to ask different questions. Not a why did they do this to me, but a what has this awakened in me that I refuse to ignore anymore. You realize that even in your lowest moments, even when you were doubted, dismissed, disrespected, you were never really lost. You were just being redirected. That's not weakness. That's evolution. And it's in that shift, in that quiet, grounded acceptance of your own unfolding, that everything begins to change. You stop seeing disrespect as an attack and start seeing it as a teacher. Maoist. One you never asked for, but one you needed to meet. If only to discover the parts of you that no longer need to be at the mercy of anyone else's approval. So let the pain shape you. Let it carve out space for something new. Let it soften what needs softening and strengthen what's been neglected. Let it pull you back to yourself, not the version that needed others to see your value, but the version that never forgot it. Because in the end, how you respond to disrespect is less about them and more about how ready you are to rise. To rise. Don't let pain make you smaller. Let it awaken the fire that was sleeping inside you all along. It's easy to feel invisible in a world that constantly measures you by likes, by applause, by whether or not someone calls your name when it matters. You show up with your heart open, your intentions honest, your effort consistent, and sometimes nobody sees it. Sometimes you give everything, and it's met with silence. And in those moments, it's tempting to believe that your value has somehow faded, that you're irrelevant, that you're not enough. you're not enough. You begin to question whether anything you're doing actually matters, because if it did, wouldn't someone say something? Wouldn't someone notice? But here's what I want you to remember. The stars don't need the sky's acknowledgement to shine. They burn anyway, quietly, consistently. Whether anyone's looking or not, just because you're not being seen doesn't mean you're not making an impact. Just because someone doesn't affirm your worth doesn't mean your worth disappeared. You are not any less radiant simply because someone else refuses or forgets to look up, to look up, to look up. There's a kind of strength, a rare and quiet strength, that lives in people who keep showing up without applause, who keep being kind even when the kindness is overlooked, who keep leading with integrity even when no one is clapping. That strength is sacred. It's the kind that doesn't demand attention because it knows its purpose isn't rooted in visibility. It's rooted in truth. You are not here to be seen by everyone. You're here to be true to something bigger, to your calling, to your character, to the rhythm of life that moves underneath all the noise. And not everyone is tuned into that rhythm. Not everyone will hear it. Not everyone can, but you can. There's this divine, almost poetic mystery to the way life works. Sometimes the most important roles are played off stage. Hit the stage. Sometimes the most vital growth happens when nobody's watching, like roots growing deep underground, invisible to the eye, but essential to everything above it. And maybe that's the real work, to learn how to stay rooted even when recognition doesn't come. To trust that your value is not attached to applause but to alignment, that the seeds you're planting, whether they're in relationships, in your work, in your quiet personal healing, they matter, even when it feels like no one's paying attention. You may never get the apology you deserve. You may never hear the words you've been waiting for from the people you gave your best to, but none of that changes what you've built. None of that takes away your growth. You are allowed to matter in silence. You are allowed to be powerful without being loud. You are allowed to walk through this world in quiet integrity, making ripples in ways you may never fully see. And maybe that's the most meaningful kind of life. One that isn't lived for validation, but for contribution, for love. For the quiet beauty of doing what's right even when no one is watching, especially when no one is watching. Because if your light only shines when it's noticed, that's not light. That's performance. But if it shines simply because that's what it was made to do, that's purpose. You don't need to prove your light. You just need to be it. There will always be people who won't see your value, who won't return the kindness, who will overlook your presence, take your loyalty for granted, or mistake your softness for weakness. Don't let them rewrite your story. Don't let their blindness make you question the brilliance of your design. They don't get the final say. Because the people who are meant for your light will recognize it without you having to dim it, to explain it, or fight for it. The right people, your people, will feel it. And more importantly, you'll feel it in your own bones, in your own breath. In the quiet peace of knowing you've remained true to yourself. So no, you don't need to be the loudest person in the room. You don't need to force your way into someone's respect. You don't need to dance for visibility. Just be who you are. Keep your heart open. Keep showing up. Keep growing. Keep growing. Keep growing. Keep shining even if no one claps. Because one day when the noise fades and the lights go down, you'll realize you weren't invisible. You were invaluable. Even when no one notices, the universe never stops watching you become. You just, you do it to the